Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Testimony and Transparency podcast. My name is Danielle, and this podcast is an extension of my small business, Naturally Created for You. So, for those of you who are new here, through my small business, I send out these weekly emails, and they're about literally everything that's going on in life from motherhood, homeschooling, being an entrepreneur, growing in my faith, all different kinds of things. And so through this podcast, I am sharing emails that I have written recently. And some of them are even as far back as 2023 when I first started sending these emails out. If you are interested in receiving the email that goes out every week, I will link that in the description. So today's episode is from an email that I sent out this past week, and it's titled Growing in Motherhood and Marriage. And so I'm going to read to you the email that I sent out. And as I'm reading it, I'll touch on different points. So it says, Good morning. My pastor shared a story about how he and his wife were in a disagreement. He left the conversation and prayed, asking God to help him understand his wife. And the Lord showed him a vision of a big book with all these beautiful pages. The pages were turning very fast, and he said God was showing him that his wife was like the book. There's a lot in there. That brought me to ask the Lord to help me understand the people in my household. And when he shared that story, I just thought, wow, what a beautiful prayer. When things happen in our life and we're feeling upset or frustrated, how often are we asking ourselves, Lord, help me to understand this person? Right? And not so you can try to get them to side with you or get them to see your point, but Lord, help me to understand their perspective so that you can know them deeper, right? So that you can try to get back on one accord with one another. And so I encourage you, if you are struggling in, your friendships, your family, your marriage, maybe with your coworkers, pray that prayer. Lord, help me to understand my boss or my coworker better. Help me to understand this particular friend better. Help me to understand my husband or my wife better, my children better, right? It's important to be able to understand so that you can connect. All right, so let's go on. I have been following a Catholic mom of 9 on TikTok for several months, and while I don't agree with some of the things she says, I can appreciate her perspective on family dynamics. She's talked a lot about the 4 temperaments, and I decided to learn more about them. I'm glad I did. And so I know a lot of you guys are familiar with the love languages or different personality types. Well, these 4 temperaments is something, and I don't know if I talked about this in this email, but the 4 temperaments came from the Greeks. The Greeks were big into philosophy and study. And so um through that, they discovered these 4 different temperaments, and it really caught on in the Catholic faith. And I'm not Catholic, I'm Christian, but like I said, I can appreciate this woman. She is a mom of 9. She homeschools her children. She's a stay-at-home mom. Her husband works, and I really appreciate her perspective on family, and I really respect her role in her home and how she navigates her home. And so I was like, I want to learn more about this. So I downloaded an audiobook, The Temperament God Gave Your Kids, to learn more about my children. And in doing so, I learned more about myself and a little bit more about my husband. One of the main takeaways I got from the book is that the temperament God gives your kids is what helps us as parents pursue holiness. And I believe the same is true about marriage. And I've been thinking a lot about this, about how situations that have occurred in my marriage, situations that have occurred with my children, situations that have occurred within my business, all of this stuff, it's hard and it's uncomfortable, and nobody wants to deal with it because it's like, who wants to deal with it? Seriously. But this type of stuff, all of it has helped sanctify me. Okay. And that is the goal. to continue to be sanctified, to continue to be made more and more like Christ. And so it's tough. But I have realized, and I actually sent a friend of mine a message. I said, I believe that my daughter is really helping me to pursue holiness. And I've had to recognize there's some things in me that I need God to get out because I'm not always gentle. I can be very harsh, especially when I'm annoyed or frustrated. I can be harsh with my words. I can be aggravated in the tone that I speak to people. That's not right, you know? Um, I can be impatient. I can be angry. And even if I'm not saying angry words, I can be angry inside. And then it's hard to show love. So these are just things that I've had to recognize and ask the Lord to help me with because I don't want to be that way. I want to be more and more like Jesus, as we all should be. As we grow in our faith, we should just be like, Lord, make me more and more like you. That is the goal. And so as we recognize these things, we should be crying out to the Lord, not continuing to walk in them, but crying out to him and say, Lord, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was impatient again. I'm sorry I was harsh again. Help me, Lord, to be more and more like you. And so it should be this process of sanctification. And I've noticed with a lot of people who call themselves to be Christians, they want to profess Christ, but they want to be nothing like Christ. It's not true Christianity. Okay, so it says from the book, I learned about the temperaments of my two kids, their strengths, their weaknesses, how to help them grow in certain areas, how to approach them about certain topics, and how to encourage them. And so, again, in the book, there's these 4 different temperaments. And I don't agree with every single thing that the book says. It is from a Catholic perspective. And so, as I mentioned, I'm not Catholic. I just think it's very interesting how they approach these 4 temperaments. It makes a lot of sense because God doesn't create us all to be the same. He gives each of us a different temperament, which your temperament is not your full personality, but it's a temperament that each of us have that allows us to be effective in the kingdom. And so it's really interesting. And so the next part is my next lesson will be the temperament God gave you. That's the book that I'm actually listening to right now. It's a bit longer. The temperament God gave your kids is about a little over 4 hours. The temperament God gave you is over 7 hours. Now, I got these on Audible, but if you go to your library app and if they have, audiobooks there, you can likely listen to these for free. I didn't know that until I was talking to my Bible study group and somebody was like, yeah, I'm gonna check my library app. And I was like, man, I should have done that. So check your library app to see if they have it. Okay, so it says, my next lesson will be the temperament God gave you because I really need to understand more about myself so that I can grow as a mom, wife, community member, business leader, and disciple of Jesus Christ. Whether your kids are toddlers, preteens, young adults, or grown, I believe it's important to understand more about their minds and how God wove them together, just as He did you and me. And then I put the links to the books. So I can certainly drop those in the description for y'all if you're interested in checking out either of these books. Personally, I did read the temperament God gave your kids first, but in listening to the temperament God gave you, a lot of the stuff is repeated. And so I would just listen to the temperament God gave you because it talks about uh, the temperaments in detail. It talks about temperaments of children, and then it's also going to talk about temperaments between spouses. So I would just read that one, honestly. Obviously, the temperament God gave your kids goes into more details about children, but I think it gives you a good idea. So highly, highly recommend checking that out. It's been so helpful because a lot of the stuff I just wasn't understanding. I was praying like, Lord, help me to love my kids better. Help me to be a better mom to them. But a lot of it starts with understanding them. And I feel like I didn't really have a good understanding because you don't know what you don't know. And I feel like the book has given me some clarity on things. Now, is it the end all be all? No, but I think it is some really good information that you kind of take away what is helpful to you and you apply that. And so I just wanted to share that. I hope this message was a blessing to you. If it was, please share it. If you are new here, please subscribe. I love y'all, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.